crappy old Trabant. First off, some history. The Trabant was the child of Sachsenring Autowerke in East Germany. Now, as you probably already know, East Germany was a communist nation. It was a satellite state of the Soviet Union. Fitting then, the Trabant is German for satellite. There was one other East German produced car, the Wartburg, but the Wartburg was more powerful, more expensive, and produced in far fewer numbers than the Trabant. Plus, it was a bit uglier than a Trabant. It was also the chosen car of state members, the police, and the Stasi. There were also a limited number of capitalist cars that managed to get imported, like the Citroen CX. But realistically, if you were a people of East Germany, the only car you could ever hope to drive was a Trabant, just like this one. East Germany was a very popular place to live. It was so popular, in fact, they had to build a giant wall to keep the tourists out. No, you know the real story behind that. So the biggest problem East Germany had was called the brain drain, which was the young and the educated, otherwise the people that knew better, had fled the country, and they kept fleeing the country. So the Trabant was built after the wall was constructed, meaning that more than likely it was built by old idiots. So in addition to the lack of caring and engineering prowess possessed by the East German worker, there was also a lack of materials, more specifically steel, because nobody wanted to give steel to a bunch of commies. So they had to devise a new material to make their new people's car out of. And that material, as you've probably already heard, is called Duroplast. Duroplast is the direct German translation of the English thermoset. Now, the main component of Duroplast is recycled cotton. Cotton made out of old clothing. So it's recycled material. And it was pressed at high temperature and high pressure with a special resin that created this unique fiberglass-like material that allowed the Trabant to be built.
Zugeschnitten wird es zu den Duroplast-Karosserieteilen gepresst.
So that's great. A lightweight recycled body-making material that saves steel. So advanced! And it has other advanced features too, like front-wheel drive and a fully independent suspension. Except, you can't get rid of Duroplast, because it lasts forever and you can't burn it safely. And the front-wheel drive isn't that advanced either. And the suspension, that's not advanced, it's just transverse leaf springs front and rear. And you might think that the car being made out of Duroplast and lasting forever is a great thing, but you'd be wrong on that too, because the floor, the frame, anything that isn't a body panel is still made out of steel. Steel that wasn't very well rust-proofed, meaning a Trabant may look good and solid and rust-free on the outside, but in reality, it has no floor. You might also think that driving around in a 1,300-pound car with thinly clad cotton doors would present a massive safety hazard. And you'd be right in America, but think about it in context. In East Germany, everyone else was also driving a Trabant, meaning no one was actually going fast enough to cause harm to somebody else. The Trabant was designed from its inception to be purely a device of transportation. It was designed in no way to reflect the owner's personalities. So as a result, well, first of all, it's a miracle that it was styled at all with those principles, but so as a result, the Trabant, not running very well, is very utilitarian. For instance, this gear stick is just a bent tube. Oh gosh, backfiring. It doesn't have a radio, it doesn't have a fuel gauge, it doesn't have basically anything. The blinker doesn't even auto-cancel. Everything that is there is manual. The windshield washer is a hand pump. Oh god, I gotta wait. What the hell? Oh. The windshield washer is a hand pump. The fuel cutoff is a knob under the dash. The choke is manual. I'm probably forgetting to say a lot of things, but I don't care. The choke is manual. It's so bare, in fact, that they felt the need to advertise its inclusion of a blinker. Now that is a true lack of features. And the stuff that is there isn't exactly well thought out, like this door lock here, which is just a rod sticking out of the door. Very little design thought went into that. Interestingly, mine is a 601S. Now the S stands for Sonderwunsch, which is German for special edition. That got you options like a fuel gauge, or maybe a radio, or hazard lights, or small things like that. There was also a deluxe version that could get you chrome bumpers, or fog lights, or decadent options like that. But mine is just an S. Now, first of all, Why does the car of socialism have trim levels? I don't know. But mine is just an S, and as far as I can tell, that only got me one option, which would be an odometer. The odometer was an option. And since an odometer is the only option I have, that means I have no fuel gauge, which means I have to lift the hood where the gas tank lives to check out, to see how much oily gas I have. I have to take off the cap and then dip in my Sachsenring Autowerke branded fuel dipstick. And I can see that I have 22 liters left. Should be enough to get me to something that's only 22 liters away. While I'm on the topic of fuel, I haven't mentioned one of the best/worst parts of the entire car, which is the engine. Now, the Trabant 601 was in production from 1963 all the way up until 1989. Now, in 1963, the engine was a two-cylinder, two-stroke, 26 horsepower roughly, air-cooled engine that was slightly below average, but kind of on par with what they had in Europe at the time in the surrounding areas. And it was okay. They described it as relatively fast. I guess if you're used to walking, it would be relatively fast. But as you can imagine, mine is a 1981, and they've made leaps and bounds in 2 decades of progress. So in 1981, this car is fitted with a 26 horsepower, two-cylinder, two-stroke. They didn't change anything. They didn't change anything in 2 decades. And the worst part, they kept this engine all the way up, almost completely unchanged, all the way up until 1989. Mine is a 1981 car, remind you, and it still has a 6-volt electrical system. They didn't upgrade it to a 12-volt system until 1984, and that was only because they needed a rear window defroster that a 6-volt system couldn't handle. In 3 decades, they changed almost nothing about the entire car, except for some minor usability improvements and some really minor styling changes. And let me tell you, competition is a good thing. And as you can see from the scene outside my window here, this engine isn't exactly the most friendly to the environment. Mercifully, all of this archaic simplicity does have its advantages. For example, it's really easy to fix with very few tools. And the gas is gravity fed, it's air cooled, it's 2-stroke, so it has no pumps in the whole car. And the only liquids contained in the entire car are the transmission fluid, the brake fluid, the gas, of course, maybe some windshield washer fluid, and the bottle of milk you have in the trunk for your small communist baby. And the whole car only weighs roughly 1,300 pounds, so it's incredibly easy to push when it inevitably breaks down. Objectively, the Trabant is a terrible car. It's a shining example of socialism/communism not working. So why did I buy one? Well, it's a blast. It's absolutely different than everything else on the road, especially here in America, and it's just so much fun, whether or not it's running. This little plastic communist car, made out of old Soviet pants, is going to provide me so much entertainment in the coming year and possibly beyond, on and off camera. Speaking of which, if you have any suggestions of what you want to see me do in this car, sound off in the comments below.